Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to our, I think it's the third session, the Research Integrity and Ethics session that will focus on the use of animals, care and use of animals in research at Stellenbosch University. I'm Winston Beukes, and I'm primarily responsible for the animal care and use program at the institution, along with my colleague Beusha, the chair Dirk, and all the veterinarians and the vice chair, and then the full research ethics committee for animal care and use. Today's discussion will be made up of 3 presentations, one by myself. I will focus mostly on the administrative aspects excuse me, of an animal care and use program. Then Professor Dirk U Bellstedt, who is the chair of the Animal Ethics Committee, will take us through the ethics associated with using animals in research. And then we will have Dr. Este Spies that will deal with all the aspects associated with managing an animal unit.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be talking about the ethics application and the whole ethics process and what that involves and the principles behind that. So let me see if I can share my screen. There we go. And here is my presentation. So the question in animal ethics, and as we will discuss it today, is what does the process involve? I'm Dirk U Bellstedt. I'm the chair of the Research Ethics Committee, Animal Care and Use, REC ACU, as it is officially called, of Stellenbosch University. I've been associated with animal ethics since its inception, which is around about the early 2000s. And as a result of that, I have a very good overview of what we are doing. So the application process in principle involves an online application process, which really makes it much easier. If you want to submit one, then have a look at this online as it is shown here, and look at all the headings that are required from you to be completed. And then what you can do is you can line up your proposal. We also require a written proposal, a full proposal, which would be a normal research proposal, as you might submit it to your department at the start of a study, which has to be attached. Now, the important thing is this is what the application process starts off with. You can orientate yourself on the website and you can start looking at what is required for your application. Now, I wish to underline an important principle here, and that is that the research development section of the university is trying to support you in your applications and is not trying to be, whoops, what have I done now? Have I stopped sharing or not?
No, it's still there. You can continue.
Okay, but now I can't see it. Okay, there we go. Right. So the idea is that the section of research development wishes to support researchers so that they can perform their animal experiments and not to be an impediment or to delay research. I'm going to point out to you what can delay your applications, but in general, what we're trying to do is to support you, and that this is a constructive engagement to support research. So what is ethics? And ethics, huge books have been written about ethics, and this is about the tightest definition that you can get for ethics. Ethics is the right thing or good thing to do when the things that we have to do or what we would like to do are in conflict. And precisely that, we've got to conform to rules and regulations, and also with regard to what are our underlying ethical principles with regard to working with animals. And animals are defined as sentient animals, ones that can sense what is going on around them, and you can see that that is a very broad description. It includes all mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes, as well as some higher urochordates. Higher urochordates are, for example, octopuses and the such like, which have now been definitely recognized to have feelings and to be sentient. So this is a broad field, and certainly it is. There's great care taken in defining which are sentient animals. It does not include invertebrates, and it does not include any microbes. Then the actual ethics approval, how is the application assessed? In order to be able to assess the animal use, it cannot be separated from actual science. And so a specific scientific motivation needs to be given, and this then has to happen in the form of a literature study, and in which referencing is given. Very importantly, this must therefore be a soundly based scientific study. And then very importantly, the numbers must allow statistically supported results, and those must be statistically valid. And so in other words, we do not want you to use excessive animal numbers, but this might sound ironic in that we will also check on the actual numbers to see whether they are such that they are sufficient to be able to allow you to make statistically valid deductions. In other words, sometimes we might even tell you that the number of animals that you've chosen, if you've say chosen a single one, that it's not enough and that there needs to be more in order to make the experiment justifiable. If the animals that are to be used are not used for a justifiable study, then they cannot be used according to animal ethics principles. Then the committee assesses the application in the light of the 5 freedoms and 3 R's, and I will get to those, including more R's. And then we check whether the proposed use of animals conforms to regulatory norms. Do you have the required permits in place? And there are a number. So the 5 freedoms that have been defined that animals have the right to are freedom from hunger and thirst. In other words, we will look very carefully at your trials that you propose to see whether you are at all inducing hunger and thirst in those animals. Then freedom from pain, injury, and disease. In other words, excessive pain. You will have to indicate if you are inducing pain, what will you do to relieve that pain. Injury to animals just simply for the sake of injury is not tolerated. And then disease is a difficult one because you cannot just simply infect animals with a disease. Even if you might be studying it, then it has to be very, very carefully motivated. In freedom from distress, that's pretty clear in that we do not allow animals to be exposed to excessive stress. Freedom from discomfort, they have to be housed properly. In other words, that they are not left in a small cage and that they are faced with sitting in their own urine or excrement. And then there's a difficult one, and that is freedom to express behavior that promotes well-being. And this is one which is the 5th freedom, which is often hotly debated. And how much must you express, must you give freedom to express their own behavior? So this is also all assessed, and behavior often has to do with additional factors that we introduce into the environment so that the animals actually are not only caged, but actually have some well-being in their cages. So the 3 R's, and as I write, and more, there are 3 basic principles which you would always find in animal ethics considerations, and also in many other applications of ethics, in fact. And those are replacement, reduction, refinement. And those we always, when assessing an application, look at very carefully. And then there have been more added: responsibility, rigor, and repetition. In cases where it is debatable as to whether you should perform the experiment and or not, we can really assess this with what is called a harm-benefit assessment, and weigh up harms against benefits and vice versa. So replacement of so-called sentient animals, we will look at wherever possible with non-sentient research models or systems in which to eliminate the use of animals. So can live animals, for example, be replaced with tissue cultures? In toxicity testing, this is often possible. And this is looked at very carefully so that you can, in actual fact, should need be, completely do your experiments without live animals. Then replacement: is the animal model really a model from what takes place in the human? This is a often complicated question. There are animal models for obesity, for diabetes, and a number of other conditions. And the question is always, is the animal model valid? If it's not valid, is it justifiable in terms of extrapolating from that possibly to humans? And then reduction of numbers. We always look at experiments. We try to ensure that the experiments have the smallest numbers that allow statistically valid deductions from the trials. And in that regard, if we have the feeling that there is not sufficient statistical support for the numbers that you have requested, we might ask you to consult with a statistician. And the university has very competent statisticians in various faculties and departments, and they can then assist you to get the numbers right, so to speak. Then refinement of animal sourcing, animal care practices, and experimental procedures to eliminate physical and physiological stress within the limitations imposed by the objectives of the research. And the question is, will the animals be suitable for the planned research? Will housing be adequate? And will food and water be supplied to eliminate the stresses and to ensure humane and ethical treatment? So housing is a very important factor, and that is considered very carefully and has to be according to certain standards. Then further R's, and there's one very important one: responsibility. And that is something that we wish to emphasize more and more strongly, and that is that research take responsibility for their animal subjects. If you keep animals in trials, it's not a matter of Monday to Friday. They also have to be looked after over weekends, and the researcher actually has to take that responsibility for the animal subjects throughout the experiments, and there may not be a lapse in care of the animals, for example, during periods when staff is not present. So the animals have priority all the time in that they need to be looked after carefully. Then rigor: does the experiment have a sound scientific base, and are the aims clear and the objectives clear? This is something that is creeping in more and more in ethics applications. And the committee is also faced with authorities that now want to tell the committee that this evaluation of whether a trial is on a sound scientific basis should actually be looked at by other departments, and we reject that. The committee has very good members of a broad spectrum of expertise and are able to assess the scientific basis of your experiment properly. And as a result of that, we need to look at this very carefully. So without a sound scientific base, animal trials can also not be approved. Then one that's funny: is this just a repetition of a previous experiment? Sometimes we get applications where a trial has been done in Europe, for example, and then there's a simple repetition here. And unless it's really motivated in that there might be some climate influence or something, just a simple repetition cannot be permitted. So that we also look at very carefully. And then respect. Animals need to be treated with respect. And they are living, sentient animals, so they have the right to be treated with respect. And the committee feels very strongly about this. Then, does the proposed use of animals conform to the regulatory norms? And one of the most important of these is that for experimental animals, the trials must conform to the SANS 10386 2021, which is a document which was drawn up by the South African Bureau of Standards. This document, should you apply for animal ethics clearance, is available, and you can download it or obtain it from Beukes or Winston in case you wish to study this precisely. And each experimental animal, certainly for the laboratory animals, are specified, obviously not necessarily for wild animals. And then for wild animals, you need permits from Cape Nature or from the National Parks Board, and you need to take into consideration there are so-called TOPS regulations. TOPS regulations mean regulations that pertain to a specific group of species, which are highly sensitive. The university itself has sought approval for a TOPS permit. In other words, within the realms of the university, one can apply and obtain permission to work with these species. But again, these things have to be properly motivated. And then with regard to farmed animals, which we are also such that we also evaluate applications there, the trials need to be performed within the Animal Diseases Act and the Meat Safety Act. And then there is the so-called Section 20 permitting, which has a role in terms of controlling animal diseases and animal vaccinations. And this Section 20 permit is such that it's very important if you work with any infectious disease, be it of a human pathogen or an animal pathogen, this has to be controlled by the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. And should your application be such that the committee thinks that it requires a so-called Section 20 permit, it will refer you to that department and will then assist you in applying for a Section 20 permit if you don't have one already. And this is something that can be sticky and needs careful consideration. It can take time. Then other things for which you require regulatory norms for GMO animals within the GMO Act, you would have to apply, and that would also have to go to the Biosafety Committee for approval. For human diseases, they would have to meet medical safety standards, e.g. in TB research. You cannot then perform TB research without the regulatory requirements. You cannot work with these organisms except in isolation and special conditions. Este will allude to those in her talk. And then very importantly, for procedures to be performed on animals, you have to have the necessary training and approval to work on animals. And for many procedures, so-called South African Veterinary Council authorization is required. And for that reason, Dr. Este Spies will specifically be talking about that as part of this discussion. Then how will you benefit? Because, I mean, you really need to know, what am I doing here and why am I doing this? It will help you to generate statistically valid research results. You obviously are going to receive support from the division in that you will potentially obtain training. And then finally, once you've completed your trial and you wish to submit it for publication, you will receive an animal ethics approval number, which will be required by journals if you want to publish your animal research. And this is a very, very important factor in that you can't just perform any experiments nowadays on animals and then expect to publish it. It has to receive ethics approval, and there is a very strong international way to ensure that you do have the necessary ethics approval before publication is possible. Then, what causes delays? And this is something that obviously we don't want. A poor scientific motivation. If your application lacks logic, or if the thing is poorly formulated, give it in sufficient detail, please, scientifically rigorous. It has to be in the form of a research proposal. Poor grammar and typographical errors are, of course, a no-no, and you need to do this carefully. And then if you require training in SAVC authorization, this will have to happen prior to your trials commencing. Section 20 approvals from DALRAD can be problematic and will certainly delay you if in some instances you are working with pathogens, so that you need to take careful consideration of, and you will be required to obtain permits from Nature Conservation. Now, the Animal Ethics Committee will not check and they will try to assist you with these permits. They will indicate to you, but they, prior to your starting with the trial, you in actual fact have to submit these approvals to the Animal Ethics Secretariat, to Winston A Beukes, and then only may you commence your trials. So these are important regulatory matters which you need to take into consideration. Then, how does the process work? The Animal Ethics Committee meets once a month to assess applications. There are deadlines by which your applications have to be submitted. However, for urgent applications, they can be speeded up by means of what we call expedited reviews. This is well supported by Mr Winston A Beukes, Beosha Thompson and Aidan Williams from the Division of Research Development. And that's a very good team that will assist you in the process. Don't hesitate to ask them. They're available both on email and by phone. Email is, of course, better because it allows them to answer in due course. But we try to, as best possible, deal with applications as fast as we can. So thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Apologies, colleagues. I had a medical emergency, but I survived and I'm back. Do we have questions for Dirk, or are we going to deal with the questions at the end of the three presentations? You are also more than welcome to make use of the chat function, where you can put the questions into the chat box, and we will answer them during the course of the presentation. Okay, so Dirk, if you can unshare, then I'll try again. Hopefully this time I won't pick the bucket, or what is it called?
No, we don't want you to do that.
Not on national TV. Okay, let's just, everybody can see my slides. So again, Winston Beukes, and I deal with animal ethics within the institution, particularly focusing on the administration or the management of the animal, the Research Ethics Committee, Animal Care and Use, and its functions, but also biosafety, biological and environmental safety, but we will deal with that presentation at another session. So as Dirk explained how animal ethics works at the institution, we have a institutional policy document that deals specifically with the responsible research conduct, where it outlines how we will treat animals if animals are to be involved in any research, teaching or testing activity within the institution. This is not a Friday afternoon or a Saturday relaxing read. You need to commit yourself to reading this document But if you don't want to read the full document, focus on the aspects that deal with animal ethics if you are going to do animal work. Just some structure within the university. So there is the policy making committee is referred to as the Senate Research Ethics Committee. And that committee is ultimately responsible for the policy for responsible research conduct and other research related policies or research ethics related policies. And there are about 5 ethics committees that function under that Senate Research Ethics Committee. The one that we're dealing with now is ACU, Animal Care and Use, and then there's the Biological and Environmental Safety, the Social, Behavioral and Educational Research Ethics Committee, and then the Health Research Ethics Committee. Each of these ethics committees will have a dedicated session that will deal with the scope and function of the work. So an animal ethics committee, in this case, the one that we're referring to, needs specific members to serve on that committee, as is prescribed by the South African National Standard that Dirk has alluded to, but also the DOH 2024 guidelines. Focusing on the SANS document, Category A refers to veterinarians, Category B is scientists with substantial experience in animal work, Category C organizations like your SPCAs, but in this case it must be the National SPCA or any other animal welfare organization. Category D then refers to community members, people from outside the institution that can represent the community in which the animal facility, university, or farm is where animal work is being conducted. These persons must not have had any prior animal work experience in terms of dissecting, doing experiments on animals. There are additional members as outlined within the DOH guidelines that refer to people with legal expertise, statisticians, members that are the managers of the animal facilities, farm managers, etc., that should also serve on the ethics committee. Dirk mentioned the definition of what an animal is. It is important to note that this definition is captured within the South African National Standard at the basis for all animal work in this country, and we remind our applicants to get that definition, to know that definition. So, because that definition will ultimately guide you in terms of whether or not you should apply for ethics clearance or not. So, although it's not a requirement to submit an ethics application for the use of animal tissues or the use of invertebrates, a notification to the committee must be submitted, just so that the committee is aware of all types of research activities that involve animals. This is not a full application, it's a very simple one-pager, and it doesn't take long to complete. Just to refer to the SABS, this is the minimum standard for the use of animals for scientific purposes in South Africa. This document is available on the DRD website. You can access it through or making use of your SU credentials, your username and password. As this document, there's a license associated with the document. So we can't, you can't download a copy of it, but you can access it. I think a copy has been placed in the library, should you wish to have a physical book that you can take from the library to use. Then the DOH guidelines is the document that particularly focuses on research within the health domain. But there are overlaps in terms of using animals for biomedical research, and for that reason, we are also required to adhere to these guidelines. So this committee is registered at the National Health Research Ethics Council, and we need to report to them on an annual basis in terms of what activities happened, how many applications did we review, how many animals were actually used in a given year. And then Dirk also referred to the national legislation. It is important to note that the use of any animals listed as threatened or protected must be used within the national framework or the National Environmental Management and Biodiversity Act. You need to have a TOPS permit in place. Stellenbosch University negotiated with the department that it has the TOPS permit, the university has the TOPS permit, and anybody wanting to make use of any of those animals must just be added to the permit as part of an amendment. I won't go into the other legislation, as Dirk has already spoken about it. So important to note, should you submit an application, there is a likelihood of the following review outcomes. So if everything is well, there's no issues with your application, the committee meets and they approve it, and you'll receive an approval letter within a day or two after the meeting. Approved with stipulations, you may start with the research subject to you providing us with the copy of the permit that you've obtained, or we ask you to minor things, provide evidence, I don't know what stipulation, I can't think of a stipulation, but these are minor things that wouldn't impact on the ethics associated with review. Modifications required is a bigger or a more detailed requirement for you to address issues raised within your submission, and this must be addressed first prior to you starting your study. Deferred, where the project requires major changes and must be submitted for review by a full committee at a full committee meeting. So it won't be a back and forth outside of a meeting. Rejected is when the project cannot be resubmitted in its current form. You have to go back to the drawing board and really change your approach. So these are the statuses that your application will receive. So it's important that you know what each of these really means. Then, as you saw from the earlier slide, it is easy to get lost within the ethics sphere within the university, as there are a number of ethics committees. It might be that your project requires approval from all four ethics committees. And then this infographic is quite useful. So if you're working with GMO animals, then it's the biosafety and the animal ethics committee. But if you're working with animals that are infected with TB, and then you are using human blood as well, then it's all four committees. So you are more than welcome to contact us, as we are quite familiar with which ethics committee should review what. And the golden thread or the message here is that you can submit, if you need 3 ethics committees or 2 ethics committees to approve your study, you can submit at the same time to these committees. If whoever finishes their review first will add a stipulation to state that this approval is subject to RegBase approval. And then once the RegBase approval is obtained, you can then start with your application or with your project. So important to note, as Dirk said, submissions must be in time. You cannot submit an application if you're a student without discussing it with your supervisor. Please make sure that your supervisor is aware of the content of the application. If you're unsure, please consult with us. Contact the ethics office by appointment. Send us an email, make an appointment. We will gladly assist you. Visit our website. Get to know the application system. Beosha is busy visiting departments and faculties with specific training on how to access the online application system. And lastly, don't be stressed out about the process. We are here to support you. If you, for any reason, get stuck, please contact us and we will gladly assist you. And that's all from my side. Thank you. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, we can hand over to Este. I don't see any hands raised for questions. Este, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Winston. I'm going to share my slides. Winston, can you confirm if you can see my slides and hear me properly?
Yes, I can
Perfect.
see the animal on the hand.
That's it. Thanks, Winston. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us in this session on animal research at the University of Stellenbosch. My name is Este Spies and I'm the Director of Animal Facilities and the Principal Veterinarian for the Faculty of Medicine and Health and for the Faculty of Science. So today I would love to provide you with a guide on how to plan your projects properly and what our facilities offer, as well as the how and the what and the when and the why of SABC authorization. So firstly, planning your animal projects properly is the best thing that you can do for the animals that you use in your projects. Planning in advance ensures not only the ethical use of these animals and looking after their welfare and their well-being, but it also makes sure that we have a project that runs smoothly and you produce good quality and reproducible results. It's important to always remember that you're not working with cells or reagents or formulations or any chemicals that you can just replace when things go wrong or when things don't work out. These are real, live, sentient animals that experience and stress and feel pain. If your projects aren't properly planned, the consequences of this are severe, and it can even result in death. So when we conduct animal projects, we need something that a lot of people don't have a lot of these days, and that is time. So you need time to plan properly. You need time to apply for your ethics, for your SABC authorization, for all the permits that my colleagues mentioned. You need time to get funding available. And you need time to order your reagents and your consumables. If they need to come from overseas, you need to have plan in advance to have these things here when your animals are ready. And then you also need time to get your animals. So I'm going to start with the first step in properly planning your animal project. And that would be make contact with the animal facility. So during this meeting, which could be a year in advance, we will discuss your project. We can sit and discuss what is your idea, what do you want to do? Do we have the animals that you need? Do we have the space, the strains, the equipment that you need? We discuss any welfare or health issues. We can discuss the budget, the calendar, and our availability to assist you with complicated procedures and whether or not you require training. So this is a very important first step in planning your project, is to make contact with the animal facility that you are planning to have your animal project at. So at the University of Stellenbosch, we have 4 registered animal research facilities. Remember, we also have the experimental farms where the production animal research projects usually take place. So at Tygerberg, we have the Tygerberg Animal Research Facility, which is the largest facility and where we breed all the animals for all the other facilities. We have the Science Faculty Small Animal Research Facility. There's a Zoology Animal Facility as well as a Zebrafish Animal Facility. All 4 of these facilities are registered with the South African Veterinary Council as animal research facilities, and they conform to a certain and specific set of rules and minimum standards as set out by the South African Veterinary Council. We also have to comply to a lot of other laws and rules and regulations, which includes the minimum standards of the SANS document, which has been mentioned by my colleagues. And all these registered animal research facilities are inspected on an annual basis by our Animal Ethics Committee, as well as animal welfare organizations, and where necessary from the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. All our animal research facilities have strict access control, and we only allow access for researchers who have approved ethics projects, as well as the staff. There's strict biosecurity control where everybody who enters needs to wear PPE, their lab coats, their boot covers, gloves. The temperatures in the rooms are all controlled. We have an HVAC system, and we set these temperatures according to the species that we house in the rooms. We also control the temperatures and there are alarms that set off to our cell phones and to security if there is a problem. We are also able to set the light timers to the specific animal, and these are all the standards that we get from the SANS document. At the Tygerberg Animal Research Facility, we house between 500 and 700 animals, and these includes mice, rats, and rabbits. And we are able to house larger animals, for example, pigs or sheep if required on short term. All these animals are kept, as I mentioned, according to the recommended standards. So we'll set their temperatures, their lights, and their cages specifically to suit their needs. And we are very strict with keeping them happy and healthy and looking after their well-being and their welfare. So all of our animals are provided with their species-specific environmental enrichment, unless it is not indicated in their REC ACU approved project. We also provide them all of them with nesting material for them to hide and feel safe in, and when necessary or when we can, and if the project allows, we'll give them treats as well. At the Tygerberg Animal Research Facility, we also have 2 large theatres where we can conduct large animal work. All of these theatres are equipped with 4 anesthetic machines with ventilators, and where we can monitor the animals throughout surgery. There's also multiple smaller procedure rooms for us to conduct small animal work, where we have 2 anesthetic machines and various other equipment that you might need for your project. We also have an ABSL3 lab. We are in the process of registering a BSL2 lab as well. In the ABSL3 lab, which Prof Bellstedt did mention, for you to work in there, usually we work with infectious agents, for example, TB. And to work in there, you have to undergo a very strict health check, which includes chest x-rays and campus health, which needs to check you and say that you are healthy enough to work in the BSL3. So in the BSL3, we have blowers and racks. So this is individually ventilated cages where we keep the animals in, and as well as a procedure room with biosafety cabinets for you to safely conduct your work in. So the second step, which my colleagues covered in your on your process of planning your animal project, would be to apply for all your approvals. So firstly, your ethics approvals, then Section 20, or biosafety if you need it, Cape Nature, any approvals that you need. This would be your second step after you've discussed your project with the animal facility. Then the third thing that I would like to go in a bit more detail is SAVC authorization. What is SAVC authorization? Who needs it? Why do you need it? When do you need it? So the SAVC is the South African Veterinary Council, and it's the veterinary statutory body in South Africa. So they are responsible for all the registered persons practicing a veterinary or paraveterinary profession. So registered paraveterinary and veterinary professionals are your veterinarians, lab animal technicians, veterinary technicians, vet nurses, and veterinary physiotherapists. So the SAVC has the legal authority over these practicing professionals, and it's compulsory for all vets and paravets to belong to the SAVC. The vision of the SAVC is that they are the custodian of quality veterinary and paraveterinary standards. So if you look at the mission of the SAVC, it is the safeguarding the health and welfare of all animals and the environment, assuring veterinary public health, and here the SAVC authorization of the researchers come in, regulating the educational, ethical, and clinical standards of the veterinary and paraveterinary professions. So according to the Veterinary and Paraveterinary Professions Act 19 of 1982, no unregistered person shall be allowed to practice any veterinary or paraveterinary procedures that should be performed by a registered veterinary or paraveterinary professional. So then the SAVC said, according to this act, the council may, after consideration of an application by a person not registered by the SAVC or deemed to be registered in terms of this act, they can authorize this person in writing to perform certain procedures. So this is how we authorize our researchers and our students to perform certain procedures that they need to fulfill in their project. So the SABC authorization is not a new rule. We often hear that when researchers have to apply for SABC authorization. This is not something new. This act has been since 1982. So what does this actually mean? So it means that if you if you need to perform any paraveterinary or veterinary procedure, you can apply for authorization to perform these procedures yourself, even though it should actually only be done by a registered veterinary or paraveterinary professional. After application process, the SABC will grant you authorization so that you yourself can perform these procedures in your project. So SABC authorization is for all procedures that are considered to be veterinary or paraveterinary procedures. You do not need authorization for husbandry. So that would be for your daily routine cleaning of cages or feeding of the animals. But we still advise that, that you come for training. So the SABC authorization is the way for us to know that someone is competent in the newest and the correct and the most modern, the most humane, the most ethical techniques and procedures when you are conducting research on your animals. Then one interesting thing is that welfare monitoring is considered a veterinary or paraveterinary procedure. So welfare monitoring is required on a daily basis every single day for you to check that your animals are still happy and healthy and that they are not suffering unnecessarily. So why welfare monitoring is considered to be a veterinary and paraveterinary procedure which requires SABC authorization is because you are making a diagnosis. You are clinically looking at this animal and saying that this animal is healthy or no, this animal is sick, this animal is underweight, this animal is dehydrated. And therefore, this requires training. And therefore, you need to know what is healthy, what is not healthy. And because you're making that diagnosis, you require SABC authorization to perform this procedure. SABC authorization is what is in the best interest of animal welfare, your research. And if your animal is happy at the end of the day, you're going to have better research results. Another important aspect of SABC authorization, of why we require SABC authorization, is because in some cases, we are able to authorize researchers to use dangerous scheduled medication. These medications need to be handled in a very strict way according to the Medicines Control Act. They need to be stored away in a specific way. They are dangerous, and therefore it needs to be regulated very tightly. So how do we do SABC authorization? So we have a theoretical and a practical hands-on training, which we do at the university. It is where all researchers get trained in the legal, the regulatory requirements, research ethics on how to perform certain procedures, how to perform welfare monitoring, how to notice what a healthy animal looks like, what an animal looks like that is not doing well. We also teach the correct husbandry and how to care for the different species. We do practical hands-on training and only the procedure that you need to perform. So if you're only going to need to do injections, we only teach you that, and we don't do anything else. And at the end of this week, your competency in these procedures are assessed and it gets signed off by the veterinarian. And then at the end, this application will be submitted to the SABC. So the SABC sits 3 times a year to decide on whether they will grant researchers and students SABC authorization. So the next deadline for submissions will be the 8th of March. Then they usually have a month to review all your documents to see that we've submitted everything. On the 4th of April, they'll sit together and work through all the applications. And usually 2 weeks to 6 months later, we get an answer if your authorization was granted. So what's important to remember is that SABC authorization is not a blanket term. You apply per institution. So if you have SABC authorization, it's only for the specific university or institution that you applied for. So that will only be the University of Stellenbosch. You can't go and perform procedures at a different university. It's also only per species. So if you are authorized to work with rats, you can only perform procedures in rats and not in mice as well. It's for specific procedures. If you are authorized to perform intraperitoneal injections, then you can only perform intraperitoneal injections and not subcutaneous injections as well. It's also only for a specific project, and it's also for a specific facility. So even within the University of Stellenbosch, if you are authorized to perform procedures at the Tygerberg facility, you can't perform the procedures at any of the other registered animal research facilities. So the application process can be quite daunting, but we are here to support you and to help you through this process. So we have a week-long training. Training needs to be at least 30 to 40 hours. There's a competency assessment on the last day, which is usually the Friday. This also includes a written assessment. There's an application fee that we need to pay, and we submit all the documents by the end of the training. So there's quite a lot of documents that we require. And this can also be quite daunting too, but I will assist you and I support you through all of these. So there's a lot of these that I will complete on your behalf. Then to maintain your SABC authorization, there's a maintenance fee that needs to be paid on a yearly basis. A supervisor report needs to be submitted every 6 months by your veterinary supervisor. And then refresher training needs to be done. So for complicated procedures, we do refresher training every 3 years. And for more complicated procedures, and for easy procedures, we usually do it every 5 years. So after we have discussed your planning of your animal project, you've got your permits and your SABC authorization has been submitted. Next, which is very important, is to look at your budget. Animal projects are very expensive. And this needs to be discussed before your project commences to make sure that there aren't any unpleasant surprises, to make sure that you have enough funding available. There's a lot of cost that needs to be considered when you are busy with the animal project. So these are some of the costs that goes into running an animal facility. So we need to buy food, bedding, cage cleaning equipment and disinfectants, the space of the facility, the staff that we employ to look after the animals on a daily basis, maintenance and servicing of the equipment, repairs, PPE, consumables, our waste disposal, and there are so many others as well. Something that's very important when it comes to planning your projects is to plan your calendar. So when you have a proper calendar, we know that we need to be available to assist you with procedures on certain days. We are also, when there are other projects happening at the same time, you are able to book the equipment that you require. If you need to use a biosafety cabinet or if you need to use an anesthetic machine, it's very important that we have these calendars beforehand so that we can manage that. It's also important to work in when is the weekends, when is the public holidays? Do you need any additional staff to come in and help you? And then also important is to keep in mind that animals need to breed. They have a 3 weeks gestation period, and then we wean them when they are 3 weeks old. So depending on at what age you need your animal, this process can take 2 or 3 months. After you have all your approvals, your ethics approvals in place, then you can request to use the facility and request animals, and we will start breeding them for you. So only once everything is ready, after your ethics have been approved, all your permits have been approved, all your training has been done, authorizations has been granted, you have everything you need for your project, all your consumables are on hand, they're not on a ship waiting at Cape Town Harbour. Only then can the orders be placed for animals. And once your animals start breeding, there's no turning back. So this is just a recap. How to plan your animal studies properly is firstly 6 months to 1 year in advance. Please contact the animal facility. Remember to make sure that you have enough funding available. Please apply for your ethics and your permits well in advance. Remember that SABC authorization can take 3 to 6 months. Plan your calendars to make sure that we are available to help you. And 2 to 3 months, depending at what age you want your animals, remember to plan that also in advance, and then you're ready to go. Thank you very much. Please feel free to ask any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Este. So I'm now going to open the floor for questions. We have about 3 minutes before we have to end. So in that 3 minutes, you are more than welcome to raise your hand, put a question to us, or you can add it in the chat area. Do not feel pressured if there is no questions. Even a comment will suffice. There is a comment from Dr. Liesel Smith. Great presentations to all presenters. Thank you, Liesel. If there's no questions, colleagues, please make sure to take down our details or visit the website of the DRT where you can find all our details so that we can assist you in whatever questions you might further have on animal ethics at Stellenbosch University. From my side, thank you very much. Dirk, do you want to say thank you?
I'd like to thank all participants and everybody who presented. Thanks very much. And if you wish to apply, we welcome applications and we hope we will be able to help you in future. Thank you.
Any last words from you, Este?
Thank you very much. If you're unsure about anything with regards to SABC authorization, please reach out to me and I will assist you.
Wonderful. Thank you to our speakers and thank you to our delegates. Keep well.